Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to break down a really powerful framework for dealing with information overload. It's all based on the work of author and, as he calls himself, thinking organizer Shinsuke Suzuki.
Okay, let's start here. This quote is from Nobel laureate Herbert Simon, and he said this way back in the 1970s. It has never been more true than it is today. We are absolutely drowning in information, and it's costing us the one thing we can't make more of, our attention. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. The amount of stuff we see in a single day is more than someone in ancient Japan saw in their entire life. It's this incredible nonstop flood, and most of it comes from that little screen in our hand. The author calls it the information explosion. And honestly, it's creating this brand new kind of exhaustion for all of us. 54 days. That's how many full 24-hour days the author calculated he personally spent on non-work-related apps in just 1 year. And, this isn't just a vague feeling that we're distracted. This is hard data that shows exactly how much of our time and focus is literally being stolen by our devices. So what's the big deal? Well, this constant stream of information, it does more than just distract us. It creates this low-level hum of anxiety in the background. We get trapped in this loop where we feel really busy because we're consuming so much stuff, but we're not actually making any real progress on the things that matter. Yes. You know that little voice in your head? The one that tells you to save every article, bookmark every website, keep every file, just in case? The author calls that the brain demon. It feels like we're being responsible, right? But what we're actually doing is just cluttering up our minds and draining our mental energy. Okay, so here's the big turning point. The problem isn't the amount of information out there. That's not going away. The real problem is that most of us don't have a system to filter it. And the very first step, the most important one, is just learning to see the difference between what's truly important and all the static that's just noise. People who are really successful, they seem to do this instinctively. They don't try to know everything. That's impossible. Instead, they put all their energy into spotting and then acting on that tiny slice of core information that's actually going to move the needle. And this brings us to a classic idea, the Pareto principle, but for information. What this means is that roughly 80% of what we consume every single day, it's just noise. Only about 20% is that core, useful stuff. So the goal isn't to get faster at absorbing everything. The goal is to get way, way better at finding that critical 20%. You've probably heard this famous quote from architecture, but it is the absolute key to powerful thinking. When you intentionally remove the things that aren't necessary, what's left becomes so much more clear and impactful. Just think about Apple's design. Its power doesn't come from what they add. It comes from their courage to take things away. Okay, so this all sounds great in theory, right? But how do we actually do it? Well, the author gives us a really simple, super memorable 3-step framework to do this systematically. It's called the ISO method. I want you to think of this like a production line, but for clarity. Information comes in at the input stage. Then it gets processed, sorted, and refined during the organized stage. And finally, what comes out at the output stage is just that pure, valuable core insight. Now here's the secret sauce. This whole process has to be conscious. It means you are actively deciding what information you even let into your brain. You're deciding how to structure it. And finally, you're deciding what is the single most important message that's actually worth sharing with someone else. All right, let's get practical. How can you actually put this to work right now? We're going to look at one really high-impact technique for each of the 3 stages of the ISO method. Okay, for input, look at the difference here. Searching for something vague like seniors business, that's like wandering into a forest without a map. You're just going to get lost in noise. But if you start with a specific question, a hypothesis, it's like having a compass. It guides you straight to the relevant core information you are actually looking for. 3, that's your magic number for the organized stage. When you're sorting through all the information you've gathered, your goal is to find just 3 core insights. Why 3? Well, it turns out our brains are really only wired to hold about 3 to 5 new pieces of information at a time. Forcing yourself to pick the top 3 is an incredible filter for finding the absolute essence of anything. And now for the output stage. We have all been on the receiving end of this, right? When someone just dumps a ton of information on you, what happens? Nothing gets through. When we try to communicate everything, we end up communicating nothing. This is what information overload feels like to your audience. It's just a big, confusing jumble. And that is the power of filtering your message before you speak. By focusing on the single most important thing, you cut through all the noise. And then everyone on your team has absolute clarity. They know exactly what matters right now. Look, using these techniques isn't just about getting more stuff done. It's about fundamentally reclaiming your own mental space so you have room to think, to create, and to lead. It really is about the power of subtraction. This is a big one. You might think the most successful people are always on, always connected. But actually, top performers are masters of being off. People like Bill Gates famously take think weeks, where they strategically disconnect from all the daily noise so they can focus on the big picture. And you don't have to go away for a whole week to do this. You can start really, really small. The whole goal is to create a deliberate, scheduled space for your brain to work without constant interruptions. It's in these quiet moments that you actually process information and, more importantly, generate your own original ideas. And really, that's the question this all leads to. Mastering the flow of information isn't just about being more organized or productive. It's about creating the right conditions for your best, most focused, and most creative work to finally have a chance to show up.